Once upon a time, in the town of Senna, on the banks of the Zambezi River, a child was born. He wasn't like other children, for he was born very tall and strong, already carrying a big sack over his shoulder and an iron hammer in his hand. He could speak like a grown man too, though he was often silent. One day his mother asked him, "My child, what name shall we call you?" He answered, "Call all the headmen of Senna here to the river's bank." His mother called the leaders, and when they arrived, he led them to a deep, dark pool known to be full of fierce crocodiles. "Oh, great men," he said clearly, "which of you will leap into this pool and defeat the crocodiles?" But no one dared step forward. So, seeing their fear, he turned, jumped into the water, and vanished. The people held their breath, thinking, "Surely the boy is cursed or mad. He's throwing away his life. The crocodiles will eat him." Then, the ground suddenly trembled, and the pool churned violently, turning red with blood. Soon after, the boy rose to the surface and swam back to shore. But he wasn't just a boy anymore. He stood before them taller and stronger than any man, handsome and powerful. The people shouted with gladness and awe when they saw his transformation. "Now, O my people," he cried, waving his hand, "you know my name. I am Makóma, which means the greater. For haven't I faced the danger you feared and slain the crocodiles where none would dare? This shows that true greatness is proven by courage in the face of fear." Then he told his mother, "Rest gently, my mother, for I must go now to make my own home and become the hero I am meant to be." Entering his hut, he took Nuendo, his iron hammer, threw the sack over his shoulder, and walked away. Makóma crossed the Zambezi and wandered for many months towards the north and west, until he reached a very hilly country. There, one day, he met a huge giant who was busy making mountains. "Greetings," shouted Makóma. "Who are you?" "I am Chieswa Mapiri, the mountain maker," answered the giant. "And who are you?" "I am Makóma, which means greater," he replied. "Greater than who?" asked the giant. "Greater than you," answered Makóma boldly. The giant roared and rushed at him. Makóma said nothing, but swung his great hammer, Nuendo, and struck the giant hard on the head. The blow was so powerful that the giant instantly shrank into a very small man who fell to his knees, saying, "You are indeed greater than I, O Makóma. Take me with you as your slave." So Makóma picked him up and dropped him into the sack on his back. He felt himself become greater then, for all the giant's mountain-making strength had flowed into him, adding to his own power. He continued his journey, carrying his new burden as easily as an eagle carries a hare. Before long, he came to a land broken up with huge stones and great clumps of earth. Looking over a heap, he saw another giant covered in dust, ripping up the earth and throwing it aside in handfuls. "Who are you?" cried Makóma, "pulling up the earth like that?" "I am Chidubulataka," said the giant. "I am making the riverbeds." "Do you know who I am?" said Makóma. "I am called Greater." "Greater than who?" thundered the giant. "Greater than you," answered Makóma. With a furious shout, Chidubulataka seized a massive clod of earth and threw it at Makóma. But the hero held his sack over his left arm like a shield, and the stones and dirt fell harmlessly upon it. Gripping his iron hammer tightly, he rushed in and struck the giant down. Chidubulataka groveled before him, shrinking smaller and smaller. When he was a manageable size, Makóma picked him up and put him into the sack beside the mountain maker. He went on his way even greater than before, as the river maker's power to shape the land now belonged to him, proving again that overcoming challenges adds to one's own abilities. At last, he came to a forest of huge baobab and thorn trees, larger than any he had ever seen. Nearby, he saw Chigwisamiti, giant who was planting this immense forest. Chiguisamiti was taller than his brothers, but Makóma wasn't afraid and called out, "Who are you, O big one?" "I," said the giant, "am Chiguisamiti, planting these baobabs and thorns as food for my children, the elephants." "Stop your work," shouted the hero, "for I am Makóma, and I wish to test my strength against yours." The giant simply plucked up a monstrous baobab tree by the roots and swung it heavily at Makóma. But the hero sprang aside just in time. As the tree weapon sank deep into the soft earth, Makóma whirled Nuendo the hammer around his head and felled the giant with one mighty blow. The stroke was so powerful that Chiguisamiti shriveled up like the other giants. When he recovered his breath, he begged Makóma to take him as his servant. "For," he said, "it is an honor to serve a man as great as you." Makóma placed him in his sack and proceeded on his journey, now carrying the wisdom of planting life within him. Traveling for many days, he finally reached a country so barren and rocky that nothing lived there. Only grim desolation reigned. And in the middle of this dead region, he found a man eating fire. "What are you doing?" demanded Makóma. "I am eating fire," answered the man, laughing. "My name is Chi-Ideamoto. I am the flame spirit, and I can waste and destroy whatever I please." "You are wrong," said Makóma, "for I am Makóma, who is greater than you, and you cannot destroy me." The fire eater laughed again and blew a searing flame at Makóma. But the hero leaped behind a rock just in time. The ground where he'd stood turned instantly to molten glass from the heat. Then the hero threw his iron hammer at Chi-Ideamoto, striking him and knocking him helpless. Makóma placed him in the sack, Woronobu, with the other great powers he had overcome, and now Makóma was truly a very great hero. He had faced diverse challenges and integrated their strengths. He now held the power to make hills, the industry to carve rivers, the wisdom to plant trees, and the ability to command fire. His greatness was a tapestry woven from overcome adversity. Wandering on, he arrived one day at a great plain, green and well-watered, full of game. In the very middle, near a large river, was a pleasant grassy spot, perfect for a home. Makóma was so pleased with the meadow that he sat under a large tree, took the sack from his shoulder, and set the tiny giants before him. "My friends," he said, "I have traveled far and am weary. Isn't this a fine place for a hero's home? Tomorrow let us gather timber to build a kraal." So the next day, Makóma and the giants went to get poles, leaving only Chi-Ideamoto, the mountain maker, to guard the camp and cook some deer meat. In the evening, when they returned, they found the giant helpless, tied to a tree by one enormous gray hair. "How is it," Makóma asked, astonished, "that we find you bound and helpless?" "O chief," answered Chi-Ideamoto, "at midday, a huge man came out of the river. His gray mustaches were so long, I couldn't see where they ended. He demanded, 'Who is your master?' I answered, 'Makóma, the greatest of heroes.' Then the man seized me, pulled a hair from his mustache, and tied me to this tree as you see me." Makóma was angry but said nothing. He drew his fingernail across the hair, which was as thick and strong as palm rope, cut it, and freed the mountain maker. The next 3 days, the same thing happened, each time to a different giant left guarding the camp. On the 4th day, Makóma stayed behind while the others cut poles, saying he would see for himself this man from the river with the impossibly long mustaches. So when the giants had gone, he tidied the camp and put meat on the fire. At midday, he heard a rumbling from the river and saw the head and shoulders of an enormous man emerge. And indeed, down the river and up the river, stretching into the blue distance, went the giant's gray mustaches. "Who are you?" bellowed the giant. "I am Makóma," answered the hero, "and before I defeat you, Tell me your name and what you do in this river." "My name is Chindebu Maugiri," said the giant. "My home is the river. My mustache is the gray fever mist that hangs over the water, and with it, I bind all who come near me until they die." "You cannot bind me!" shouted Makóma, rushing at him and striking with his hammer. But the river giant's skin was so slimy the blow slid off harmlessly. As Makóma stumbled, the giant swung a long hair around him and tripped him up. For a moment, Makóma was helpless. But then he remembered the power of the flame spirit within him. He breathed a fiery breath upon the giant's hair, burning it instantly and freeing himself. Proof that past victories provided the tools for future struggles. As Chindebu Maugiri leaned forward to seize him, the hero quickly threw his sack Woronovu over the giant's slippery head. Gripping his iron hammer, he struck again. This time the blow landed solidly on the dry sack, and Chindebu Maugiri fell dead. When the four giants returned at sunset, they rejoiced that Makóma had overcome the fever spirit. They feasted late into the night. But in the morning, Makóma sat by the fire, his face gloomy. "In the night, my friends," he said, "the spirits of my fathers spoke to me. They said, 'Go from here, Makóma. You will have no rest until you find and fight Sakatirina, who has 5 heads and is immensely strong. Take leave of your friends, for you must go alone.'" Greatness, it seemed, demanded ever greater tests. The giants were sad, but Makóma comforted them. Then, showing his own inner strength no longer needed their borrowed power, he gave back to each the gifts he had taken from them. Bidding them farewell, he went on his way alone. Makóma traveled far towards the west, over rough mountains and through swamps, fording deep rivers and crossing dry deserts where most would have died. At length, he reached a hut near some huge peaks. Inside were 2 beautiful women. "Greetings," said the hero. "Is this the land of Sakatirina of 5 heads whom I seek?" "Greetings, O great one," answered the women. "We are Sakatirina's wives. Your search is over, for there stands he whom you seek." They pointed to what Makóma had thought were 2 tall mountain peaks. "Those are his legs," they said. "His body is hidden in the clouds." Makóma was astonished at the giant's size, but undaunted, he walked to one of Sakatirina's legs and struck it heavily with nuendo. Nothing happened. He hit again and again. Presently he heard a tired, faraway voice say, "Who is scratching my feet?" Makóma shouted as loud as he could, "It is I, Makóma, called Greater!" But there was no answer. Then Makóma gathered all the dead wood he could find, piled it high around the giant's legs, and using his firepower, set it ablaze. This time the giant spoke, his voice like thunder. "Who is making that fire smolder around my feet?" "It is I, Makóma," shouted the hero. "I have come from far away to see you, O Sakatirina. The spirits commanded me to seek and fight you, lest I grow weary of myself with no challenge." There was silence. Then the giant spoke softly. "It is good, O Makóma, for I too have grown weary. There is no man so great as I, therefore I am all alone. Guard yourself." Bending suddenly, he seized the hero and dashed him upon the ground. And amazingly, instead of death, Makóma found life. He sprang up mightier in strength and stature than before, the impact itself forging him anew. Rushing in, he gripped the giant and wrestled with him. Hour by hour they fought, mountains rolling beneath their feet like pebbles. Now Makóma would break free and strike with nuendo. Now Sakatirina would pluck up mountains and hurl them at the hero. Neither could defeat the other. At last, on the 2nd day, they grappled so strongly they could not break apart. Their strength failing, just as the sun sank, they fell together to the ground, unconscious. In the morning, Mulimo, the great spirit, stood beside them. He said, "O Makóma and Sakaterina, you are heroes so great that no earthly power may stand against you. Therefore, you will leave the world and make your home with me in the clouds." And as he spoke, the heroes became invisible to the people of Earth and were seen no more among them. And so, the story of Makóma teaches us that the path to true greatness is paved with challenges, big and small. For it is not merely winning, but the courage to face every obstacle and grow stronger from the struggle that lifts the soul towards the heavens.